Tonight, we're covering the life and legacy of the renowned polymath Benjamin Franklin. Franklin was a visionary thinker, inventor, and statesman whose contributions shaped the course of American history and scientific progress. From his groundbreaking experiments with electricity to his crucial role in drafting the Declaration of Independence, Franklin's influence is still felt today. So, before we dive into this incredible journey, take a moment, if you haven't already, to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, let us know the time and location from which you are watching. Now, let's get right into our fascinating story, and we hope it helps you learn while you sleep. The streets of Boston in the early 18th century were alive with the sounds of commerce, horse-drawn carriages, and the chatter of townsfolk bustling about their daily lives. Among them was a young boy, no different from the others in appearance but already set apart by a restless mind and an insatiable hunger for knowledge. His name was Benjamin Franklin. Born on January 17, 1706, in a modest house on Milk Street, Benjamin was the 15th of 17 children in the Franklin household. His father, Josiah Franklin, was a tallow chandler, an ordinary tradesman who made soap and candles. It was a humble existence, but within those cramped quarters, the seeds of genius were sown. From an early age, Benjamin displayed a keen intellect, an independent spirit, and an unquenchable curiosity about the world around him. Josiah had hoped that his son would enter the clergy, a path of learning and prestige. But the cost of formal education was beyond their means. Young Benjamin attended the Boston Latin School for only 2 years before financial realities forced his father to withdraw him. His formal schooling had ended, but his education was far from over. The world itself would be his classroom. Despite the financial hardship, Josiah recognized the boy's sharp mind. He introduced him to reading and reasoning, instilling in him a love for books that would shape the rest of his life. Benjamin devoured any book he could find, classics, essays, scientific treatises, and works on philosophy. These books became his teachers, offering him a window into a world far beyond the shores of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. At the age of 12, Benjamin was apprenticed to his older brother James Franklin, a printer and the owner of a small newspaper, the New England Courant. It was here, amidst the clanking of printing presses and the smell of fresh ink, that Benjamin found his true calling. He learned the trade quickly, setting type, running the press, and handling deliveries. But more importantly, he absorbed the power of the written word. The Courant was unlike any other newspaper in Boston. It was bold, critical of the local government, and unafraid to challenge authority. James, ever the rebellious spirit, took great pleasure in stirring controversy. But it was Benjamin who would soon make the greatest impact. Yearning to contribute his own thoughts to the newspaper, Benjamin knew that his older brother would never allow it. So he devised a plan. Late at night, he penned a letter under the pseudonym Silence Dogood, a fictional widow with sharp wit and a keen sense of humor. He slipped the letter under the printing shop door, waiting anxiously to see if James would publish it. To his delight, the letter appeared in the next issue. The mysterious Mrs. Dogood quickly became a sensation, her witty observations and biting social commentary winning the admiration of Boston's readers. No one suspected that the wise and opinionated writer was, in fact, a teenage apprentice. For weeks, Benjamin continued the charade, submitting letter after letter, each one more daring than the last. The people loved Silence Dogood. James had no idea that his younger brother was behind the deception. But the truth, as it always does, eventually came to light. When James discovered Benjamin's secret, he was not amused. Instead of praising his brother's ingenuity, he grew resentful. There was a rivalry brewing between them, one that would soon come to a head. Benjamin, ever ambitious and unwilling to be held back, knew that his time in Boston was nearing an end. He needed freedom. He needed to forge his own path. And so, at the age of 17, with little more than the clothes on his back and a heart full of dreams, Benjamin Franklin made a decision that would change his life and the course of history. He would leave Boston behind. Philadelphia awaited. The sun had barely risen when Benjamin Franklin set out on his journey to Philadelphia. At only 17, he was leaving behind the familiar streets of Boston, the bustling print shop of his brother James, and the city where he had spent his entire childhood. With no real plan but an unshakable belief in his own abilities, he ventured into the unknown. His journey was not easy. With little money to his name, Franklin traveled by foot, boat, and borrowed rides, enduring harsh weather and sleepless nights. At one point, he found himself stranded in New York, hoping to find work as a printer. But no opportunities presented themselves, and he was forced to continue southward. Days later, exhausted and hungry, he finally arrived in Philadelphia in October 1723. It was a moment of rebirth, the beginning of a new chapter. As he stepped off the boat and onto the city's muddy streets, he was far from the respectable statesman he would one day become. His clothes were disheveled, and he had barely a few coins to his name. But he had something more valuable: ambition, intelligence, and an unrelenting work ethic. One of Franklin's earliest memories of Philadelphia was a simple, almost comical one. With only a few pennies in his pocket, he bought 3 large loaves of bread from a baker and walked through the city with one under each arm, eating the third as he wandered aimlessly. He must have looked like a strange sight, a ragged young man with an insatiable hunger, both for food and for success. Philadelphia, though smaller than Boston, was a city on the rise. It was a hub of commerce and opportunity, filled with tradesmen, merchants, and printers. Franklin soon found work with Samuel Keimer, a local printer who recognized the young man's talent. Though Keimer was not particularly skilled at the craft, Franklin saw an opportunity to learn and improve his trade. While working in Keimer's shop, Franklin quickly built a reputation for himself. He was diligent, resourceful, and always eager to learn. Unlike many apprentices who simply followed orders, Franklin sought to master every aspect of the printing business. But life in Philadelphia was not just about work. Franklin, always the keen observer of human behavior, began forming connections. He caught the attention of Sir William Keith, the governor of Pennsylvania, who saw potential in the young printer. Keith, impressed by Franklin's intellect and ambition, suggested that he travel to London to purchase printing equipment and start his own business. The idea thrilled Franklin. At just 18, he was being given a chance to become a master of his trade and a businessman. But there was one problem: he had no money to finance the trip. Governor Keith, however, assured him that he would provide the necessary funds and even wrote letters of recommendation for him. Trusting Keith's word, Franklin set sail for England in 1724, believing that his future was about to take a remarkable turn. But when Franklin arrived in London, he faced the devastating truth: Keith had made false promises. There was no money waiting for him, no letters of credit, no financial support of any kind. He had been deceived. Stranded in a foreign country with no resources, Franklin found himself at one of the lowest points of his young life. But instead of despairing, he did what he had always done: he adapted. Rather than return home in shame, Franklin took control of his own destiny. He found work at a printing house in London, refining his skills and learning more about the industry. He read voraciously, met intellectuals, and even wrote his first published pamphlet, a dissertation on liberty and necessity, pleasure and pain, a philosophical argument reflecting his evolving worldview. For nearly 2 years, Franklin lived and worked in London, gaining valuable experience that would later serve him well. He never forgot the betrayal, but he also never allowed it to define him. By 1726, Franklin was ready to return to America. He had matured, learned from his mistakes, and vowed to build a future on his own terms. He was no longer just an ambitious young man, he was a man with a plan. As his ship set sail back to Philadelphia, Franklin looked out at the endless ocean, knowing that his true journey was only just beginning. As the ship carrying Benjamin Franklin approached the shores of Philadelphia in 1726, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. His time in London had been a harsh lesson in self-reliance. No longer was he the naive young man who had blindly trusted Governor William Keith's empty promises. Now, he returned with experience, knowledge, and a firm resolve to carve out a future for himself. Upon his arrival, Franklin sought employment once again at Samuel Keimer's printing shop, where he had previously worked before his ill-fated trip abroad. But this time, Franklin was no ordinary apprentice. He had gained valuable skills in London, refining his expertise in typography, press management, and writing. Keimer recognized his talent, but it was clear that Franklin had outgrown working under someone else. He needed his own venture. Around this time, Franklin began forming connections that would shape his future. One of the most important was his friendship with Hugh Meredith, a fellow worker at Keimer's shop. The two shared ambitions of running their own printing business, and Meredith's father saw potential in Franklin. He offered to help finance their endeavor. In 1728, Franklin and Meredith officially opened their own printing house in Philadelphia. It was a modest operation, but Franklin's sharp business instincts and work ethic quickly made it a success. He knew that to thrive, he had to do more than just print, he had to innovate. One of Franklin's smartest business moves was acquiring the Pennsylvania Gazette in 1729, a struggling newspaper that he transformed into one of the most influential publications in the colonies. His editorials were sharp, insightful, and unafraid to challenge authority. Unlike other newspapers that simply reported events, Franklin engaged readers, blending wit, wisdom, and political thought. His rise as a printer was swift, but Franklin was never satisfied with doing just one thing. His mind was always at work, seeking ways to improve not only his business but also society itself. Success in business was important, but Franklin also sought intellectual and social growth. In 1727, at the age of 21, he founded the Junto, a club for mutual improvement. The group consisted of young tradesmen and thinkers who met regularly to discuss philosophy, politics, science, and moral issues. They debated ideas, shared knowledge, and helped each other grow both professionally and personally. The Junto was more than just a discussion group, it became a force for progress. Franklin used the club as a launching pad for ideas that would later shape Philadelphia's civic and cultural landscape. Many of the city's future institutions, including its first lending library, fire department, and hospital, would stem from ideas born in Junto meetings. As Franklin's professional life flourished, so too did his personal affairs. Around this time, he rekindled a relationship with Deborah Read, a woman he had known before his trip to London. Their courtship had been interrupted years earlier, and in Franklin's absence, Deborah had married another man. However, her husband later abandoned her, leaving her in a complicated legal position. Since formal divorce was not an easy option at the time, Franklin and Deborah entered into a common-law marriage in 1730. Their union was a partnership of mutual respect and practicality. Deborah provided stability at home while Franklin pursued his ambitions. Together they raised a son, Francis Folger Franklin, and later, a daughter, Sarah Franklin Back. Their home life, though simple, was filled with books, discussions, and Franklin's ever-growing experiments. By the early 1730s, Benjamin Franklin was no longer just an apprentice or a struggling young man. He was a successful printer, writer, and community leader. His newspaper, the Pennsylvania Gazette, was widely read. His business was thriving. And through the Junto, he had planted the seeds of social progress that would bear fruit for years to come. Yet Franklin's story was far from complete. His restless mind was always searching for the next big idea. Printing had given him financial independence, but it was his curiosity, ingenuity, and civic spirit that would soon elevate him to legendary status. He was no longer just a printer. He was a thinker, an innovator, and a man destined to leave a lasting mark on history. And soon, the world would witness his greatest inventions and contributions. By the early 1730s, Benjamin Franklin had secured his place as a successful printer, writer, and businessman in Philadelphia. But Franklin was never one to settle for success in just one field. His insatiable curiosity and commitment to public good propelled him toward projects that would forever change the city, and eventually, the world. One of his first major contributions to society was the creation of America's first lending library. Franklin had always believed that knowledge should be available to everyone, not just the wealthy elite who could afford to buy books. Inspired by discussions in his Junto Club, he proposed an idea, a subscription-based library where members could pool their money to purchase books and share them. In 1731, Franklin and his junto peers officially established the Library Company of Philadelphia. It became the first public library in the American colonies, allowing ordinary citizens to expand their knowledge and engage with literature that would have otherwise been beyond their reach. Franklin later reflected on this as one of his proudest achievements, as he had helped build the foundation for the spread of knowledge and education. While Franklin's newspaper, the Pennsylvania Gazette, continued to grow in popularity, he wanted to create something even more accessible to the common person, something that provided practical wisdom, entertainment, and inspiration. Thus, in 1732, he published the first edition of Poor Richard's Almanac under the pen name Richard Saunders. The almanac was more than just a calendar. It contained weather forecasts, household tips, astronomical data, witty proverbs, and moral lessons. Franklin's maxims, written in a simple and relatable style, resonated with everyday people. Sayings like, "Early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise," and "A penny saved is a penny earned," became legendary. Year after year, Poor Richard's Almanac sold tens of thousands of copies, making Franklin one of the most widely read authors in colonial America. His talent for blending humor, wisdom, and common sense cemented his reputation as a man of intellect and practicality. Franklin's mind never rested. Even as he managed a thriving business, he constantly experimented with new ideas. He began focusing on scientific discoveries and inventions, many of which were aimed at improving daily life. One of his first notable inventions was the Franklin stove, which he introduced in 1742. At the time, most homes relied on inefficient fireplaces that wasted heat and filled rooms with smoke. Franklin designed a more efficient heating system that provided better warmth while consuming less wood. His invention became incredibly popular, and though he could have profited immensely from it, he refused to patent the design, believing that inventions meant to benefit society should be freely shared. Another of Franklin's lesser-known but equally clever innovations was the lightning rod, which he developed after his groundbreaking experiments with electricity. At a time when lightning strikes frequently caused fires in wooden buildings, Franklin's lightning rod provided a safe way to channel electricity from the sky to the ground, preventing destruction and saving lives. Franklin was not content with simply improving his own life. He wanted to improve the entire city of Philadelphia. Throughout the 1730s and 1740s, he played a critical role in founding several important institutions that would transform the city into a more organized, safe, and intellectual place. The first volunteer fire department, 1736. At a time when fire was a constant threat to homes and businesses, Franklin helped create the Union Fire Company, a group of trained citizens who worked together to extinguish fires. This marked the beginning of organized fire protection in America. The American Philosophical Society, 1743. Franklin believed that scientific discoveries and ideas should be shared. This led him to establish one of the first scientific organizations in America, where scholars could collaborate and exchange ideas. The first public hospital, 1751. Seeing the need for proper medical care in the colonies, Franklin helped establish the Pennsylvania Hospital, the first of its kind in America. The University of Pennsylvania, 1749. Passionate about education, Franklin laid the groundwork for what would become one of the first non-religious universities in the country. Each of these institutions was a reflection of Franklin's belief in practical innovation and public service. He wasn't just a thinker, he was a doer, a builder, and a visionary. By the mid-1700s, Benjamin Franklin was no longer just a printer or a writer. He was a scientist, an inventor, and a civic leader. His efforts to improve Philadelphia and colonial society as a whole demonstrated his deep commitment to the betterment of humanity. Yet, Franklin's greatest discoveries and most influential contributions were still ahead of him. The next chapter in his life would take him beyond Philadelphia, beyond the printing press, and into the realm of science, diplomacy, and revolution. By the mid-18th century, Benjamin Franklin had already left an indelible mark on Philadelphia through his civic institutions, publishing success, and innovative ideas. But Franklin's mind was never content with routine achievements. He sought knowledge in every aspect of life. His next great fascination? Electricity. At the time, electricity was a poorly understood phenomenon. European scientists had conducted experiments, but it remained more of a curiosity than a practical field of study. Franklin, however, saw potential where others saw mystery. He set out to unlock its secrets, and, in doing so, revolutionized the scientific world. Franklin began his electrical studies in the 1740s, after learning about recent discoveries in Europe. He conducted experiments using glass tubes, metal rods, and charged objects, exploring the nature of electrical forces. Through his careful observations, Franklin proposed that electricity was not composed of different types, as some scientists believed, but rather a single force that could exist in a positive or negative state. He coined the terms positive and negative charges, which are still used in physics today. Franklin also discovered the principle of conservation of charge, stating that electricity is neither created nor destroyed, it simply moves from one object to another. But his most famous experiment would soon follow, one that would forever link his name to the skies above. By 1752, Franklin had developed a bold hypothesis. Lightning was not an act of divine intervention, but a form of electricity. If he could prove this, he believed that people could harness it for practical use, potentially preventing fires caused by lightning strikes. To test his theory, Franklin devised a daring experiment. On a stormy summer day, Franklin and his young son William ventured into an open field with nothing but a simple kite, a silk string, and a metal key. As dark clouds gathered, Franklin launched the kite into the sky, allowing it to be carried by the wind. The silk string was tied to the metal key, which he held cautiously. For a time, nothing happened. But as the storm intensified, Franklin noticed something remarkable. The fibers of the string began to bristle, repelled by an invisible force. Then, when Franklin moved his knuckle close to the key, a spark leaped between them. Electricity. Lightning, he realized, was simply a massive discharge of electrical energy from the sky. His theory was correct. This groundbreaking discovery was one of the most important scientific breakthroughs of the 18th century. It proved that natural forces could be studied, understood, and controlled, a concept that would fuel the age of enlightenment. Franklin didn't just study electricity, he sought to use it for the betterment of society. After proving that lightning was electrical in nature, he developed the lightning rod, a simple yet revolutionary device that redirected electrical energy safely into the ground. Before Franklin's invention, lightning strikes frequently caused devastating fires, especially in cities where wooden buildings stood close together. With his lightning rod, buildings and ships could be protected, saving countless lives and structures. The device quickly gained popularity in Europe and America, further establishing Franklin as a leading scientific mind. Unlike many inventors of his time, Franklin refused to patent the lightning rod, believing that knowledge should be shared freely for the good of humanity. Franklin's electrical experiments made him famous worldwide. Scientists across Europe praised his discoveries, and in 1753, he was awarded the Copley Medal, the highest scientific honor of the time, equivalent to a modern-day Nobel Prize. His work earned him membership in the Royal Society of London, making him one of the first Americans to receive such recognition. His reputation as a scientist and intellectual now rivaled that of the greatest minds of the Enlightenment. But Franklin's story was far from over. While his scientific contributions were extraordinary, his political and diplomatic journey was just beginning. Soon, his restless spirit would be called upon to face an even greater challenge: the fate of a young and restless America. By the mid-1750s, Benjamin Franklin had achieved more than most men could dream of. He was a successful printer, a respected scientist, and a civic leader. His experiments with electricity had made him famous across Europe, and his lightning rod was saving lives. But despite his many achievements, Franklin's greatest role was yet to come. As tensions between Britain and the American colonies began to rise, Franklin found himself drawn into the world of politics and diplomacy. His sharp mind and persuasive writing would soon make him one of the most influential figures in America's fight for independence. Long before the American Revolution, Franklin recognized the need for unity among the colonies. In 1754, as war loomed between Britain and France over control of North America, Franklin attended the Albany Congress, a meeting of colonial leaders in New York. His goal? To convince the colonies to unite under a single government for mutual defense and cooperation. It was here that Franklin proposed the Albany Plan of Union, a revolutionary idea that called for a central government for all 13 colonies, a Grand Council made up of representatives from each colony, a system for taxation and military defense. To promote the idea, Franklin published his famous political cartoon, Join or Die. The image, featuring a snake cut into pieces, symbolized that if the colonies did not unite, they would fall separately. Though the Albany Plan was ultimately rejected by both the colonies and Britain, it was the first real attempt to create a unified American government, a vision that would come to life 2 decades later during the Revolution. As Britain and France plunged into the 7 Years' War, 1756 to 1763, known in America as the French and Indian War, Franklin played a key role in colonial defense. In Pennsylvania, he organized a militia to defend the colony against attacks. His leadership and ability to negotiate with different groups, including Native American tribes, proved invaluable. During the war, Franklin traveled to London as a representative of Pennsylvania, hoping to persuade British leaders to give the colonies more control over their own affairs. Though he was still loyal to Britain at this time, his experiences in London would slowly change his views on the relationship between the colonies and the British Crown. At first, Franklin believed in working within the British system. He admired British institutions and hoped that the colonies could gain more rights while remaining under British rule. But as time passed, Franklin became disillusioned. He witnessed firsthand how British officials looked down on the American colonies. They saw colonists as inferior, unworthy of full rights, and fit only for serving the empire's needs. Then came the Stamp Act of 1765, a turning point. The Stamp Act was a British law that placed a direct tax on all printed materials in the American colonies, including newspapers, legal documents, and playing cards. It was the first time Britain had imposed a direct tax on the colonists without their consent. Colonists were outraged. They argued that only their own elected assemblies had the right to tax them, not the British Parliament. This gave rise to the slogan. Franklin, who was in London at the time, at first underestimated the anger this would cause in America. But as protests erupted across the colonies, he quickly changed his stance and became one of the strongest voices against the Stamp Act. In 1766, Franklin was called to testify before the British Parliament. His words were powerful. The Americans are willing to pay taxes, but only to their own assemblies. They will never consent to a tax imposed by a parliament in which they have no representation. His testimony was instrumental in getting the Stamp Act repealed, making him a hero in the colonies. But Britain wasn't done trying to control the American economy. The fight for independence was just beginning. By the 1770s, Franklin's view of Britain had shifted completely. He had spent nearly 20 years in London, hoping to improve relations between Britain and America. But British arrogance, repeated taxation efforts, and harsh treatment of colonists had convinced him that America needed to break free. In 1775, Franklin returned to Philadelphia. The colonies were on the brink of war. The time for debate was over. Revolution was coming. And Franklin was ready to help lead it. By 1775, the American colonies were on the verge of war. Benjamin Franklin, once a loyal British subject, had transformed into a fierce advocate for American independence. After nearly 20 years in London, where he had tried, and failed, to reason with British leaders, Franklin returned home to find a nation ready to fight for its freedom. The conflict between Britain and its American colonies had finally reached a breaking point. The British government, ignoring years of protests, continued to tax and control the colonies without giving them representation in Parliament. In response, the colonists had organized resistance movements, boycotts, and protests, leading to violent clashes with British soldiers. Then came April 19, 1775, the day everything changed. At Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts, British troops attempted to seize colonial weapons and arrest rebel leaders. But they were met by armed American militia, leading to the first shots of the American Revolution. When Franklin received news of the battle, he knew there was no turning back. The war for independence had begun. Just a month later, Franklin was elected as a delegate to the Second Continental Congress, the assembly of colonial leaders responsible for guiding America through the crisis. He was one of the oldest members. At 69 years old, his body had grown weaker, but his mind remained as sharp as ever. As Congress debated what to do next, Franklin pushed for independence. He knew that the colonies could never go back to being ruled by Britain, not after so much blood had been shed. But not everyone was convinced. Many leaders, including John Dickinson of Pennsylvania, still hoped for a peaceful reconciliation with King George III. They sent the Olive Branch Petition, a final plea for peace, to the British king. Franklin knew it would fail. He had seen the British government's arrogance firsthand. The king rejected the petition and declared the colonies to be in open rebellion. Now there was only one path forward: full independence. By 1776, the time had come to make it official. Congress appointed a committee of 5 to draft a Declaration of Independence, and Franklin was among them, alongside Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Roger Sherman, and Robert Livingston. Though Franklin did not write the document himself, his influence was undeniable. Jefferson, the main author, often consulted him, and Franklin's edits helped shape the final draft. One of Franklin's most famous changes came in Jefferson's opening lines. Jefferson had originally written, "We hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable." Franklin, ever the master of clarity and impact, suggested a simpler and stronger phrase. "We hold these truths to be self-evident." On July 4, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was officially adopted. Franklin, along with 56 other delegates, signed his name to the document. He knew the risks. By signing, he was committing treason against Britain, punishable by death. Yet, as he famously remarked, "We must all hang together, or assuredly we shall all hang separately." The United States of America was born. But Franklin's role in the Revolution was far from over. While George Washington led the war effort on the battlefield, Franklin was given a different but equally critical task. He was sent to France to secure military and financial support for the American cause. It was the most important diplomatic mission of the entire war. Without France's help, America's chances of winning were slim. At nearly 70 years old, Franklin once again crossed the Atlantic Ocean, this time on a mission that would determine the fate of the Revolution. His diplomatic skills, charm, and wit would soon prove to be as powerful as any army. Victory depended on him. By late 1776, the American Revolution was raging, and Benjamin Franklin had embarked on perhaps the most critical mission of his life. While George Washington fought the British on the battlefield, Franklin set sail for France with a different but equally vital goal: convincing the French government to support the American cause. At 70 years old, Franklin was no longer a young man. He suffered from gout and the toll of decades of work, travel, and stress. Yet his mind remained as sharp as ever. The fate of the American Revolution now rested largely on his ability to persuade the most powerful monarchy in Europe to join the fight against Britain. Franklin arrives in France. Franklin arrived in Paris in December 1776, accompanied by Silas Deane and Arthur Lee, 2 other American diplomats. His presence immediately caused a stir. To the French people, Franklin was already a celebrity. News of his electricity experiments, lightning rod, and revolutionary ideals had spread across Europe. He was seen as a man of wisdom and enlightenment, embodying both science and democracy. Unlike other diplomats, who dressed in elaborate aristocratic fashion, Franklin embraced simplicity. He wore a fur hat, plain clothes, and spectacles, presenting himself as the image of the wise and humble American Republican. The French adored him. He was invited to salons, banquets, and royal gatherings, where he charmed nobles, intellectuals, and even King Louis XVI himself. He used wit, humor, and diplomacy to win over the French elite, carefully laying the groundwork for an alliance. Convincing France to support America. At first, France was hesitant to openly support the American colonies. Though they had been rivals with Britain for centuries, the French government feared that backing the American rebels could provoke war with Britain before they were ready. For months, Franklin negotiated behind the scenes, building relationships with French politicians, financiers, and military leaders. He stressed that an independent America would weaken Britain, which would be to France's advantage. Then, in 1777, Franklin received the best possible news: the American victory at Saratoga. In a shocking turn of events, American forces had defeated a large British army at the Battle of Saratoga, proving that the revolutionaries were capable of winning battles against the British. This victory changed everything. Now, France saw an opportunity. If they supported America, they might help defeat Britain and reclaim lost territories in North America and the Caribbean. The Treaty of Alliance, 1778. After months of careful diplomacy, Franklin's mission succeeded. On February 6, 1778, France officially recognized the United States and signed the Treaty of Alliance, committing military, financial, and naval support to the American cause. This was a turning point in the Revolutionary War. With French troops, weapons, money, and their powerful navy, the American colonies gained the resources they desperately needed. Britain was now forced to fight a global war, with French forces challenging them in Europe, the Caribbean, and India. Franklin had done the impossible. He had secured the aid of the most powerful military in Europe, changing the course of history. Franklin remained in France for nearly a decade, continuing to serve as America's top diplomat. During this time he negotiated loans that kept the American war effort funded, strengthened ties between France and the new United States, published political essays promoting the ideas of liberty and democracy. The French continued to idolize him, viewing him as a symbol of the Enlightenment. His fur hat became a fashion trend among the French elite, and portraits of him were sold across Paris. Yet, despite his success, Franklin longed to return home. The war was nearing its end, and America was on the brink of victory. In 1783, Franklin helped negotiate the Treaty of Paris, which officially ended the war and recognized American independence. After 8 years in France, Franklin finally returned to America in 1785, a hero and a founding father of the newly formed United States. But his work was still not finished. At 79 years old, Franklin had one more great task ahead of him: helping shape the Constitution of the United States. By 1785, Benjamin Franklin had finally returned home to America after nearly a decade in France. He was now 79 years old, physically weakened by years of diplomatic work, but his mind remained sharp. He had helped win the American Revolution, but the struggle for a united and lasting nation was just beginning. America had won its independence, but now the young republic needed a government strong enough to hold the states together, yet free enough to preserve the liberties they had fought for. Franklin knew that this would be the final and most important challenge of his life. Despite his age, Franklin did not retire upon his return. Instead, he was immediately elected president of Pennsylvania, equivalent to governor, in 1785, a position he held for 3 years. During his time in office he focused on abolishing slavery, becoming the head of the Pennsylvania Abolition Society. Continued his work on education, public institutions, and civic improvements. Advocated for stronger national unity among the states. But Franklin knew that Pennsylvania's success alone wasn't enough. America needed a firm, fair, and functional government, or the fragile young nation would collapse into chaos. In 1787, Franklin was chosen as a delegate to the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. The purpose? To create a new system of government to replace the failing Articles of Confederation, which left America weak and divided. The convention was filled with tension. Delegates from different states disagreed on nearly everything: the power of the federal government, representation, and the rights of the states. Some feared creating another monarchy, while others worried that too much democracy would lead to mob rule. Franklin, the oldest delegate at 81 years old, often acted as the peacemaker, using his wisdom and humor to diffuse conflicts. During one particularly heated debate, Franklin stood up and made a powerful appeal for unity. "We must all keep our heads, gentlemen. For the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see that God governs in the affairs of men." His calm demeanor and reputation as a respected elder statesman helped bridge the divisions among the delegates. One of the most controversial issues of the convention was slavery. Franklin had once owned slaves, but over the years, he had changed his views completely. He had come to believe that slavery was morally wrong and a threat to America's democratic ideals. As president of the Pennsylvania Abolition Society, Franklin pushed for the end of slavery. He even submitted a petition to Congress in 1790, calling for the gradual abolition of the slave trade. However, many Southern states refused to give up slavery, and Franklin's efforts were blocked. He was deeply disappointed, but he hoped that future generations would correct this injustice. Despite the disagreements, Franklin and the other delegates completed their work in September 1787. The result was the United States Constitution, one of the most remarkable political documents in history. When it came time to sign, Franklin, though frail and exhausted, proudly added his name. As he looked at the sun painted on the back of George Washington's chair, he made his famous observation. "I have often wondered whether that sun was rising or setting. But now I know, it is a rising sun." Franklin believed that the United States was just beginning, full of hope and promise. After the convention, Franklin returned home to Philadelphia, spending his last years writing, studying, and continuing his efforts for abolition and education. His health declined rapidly, but he remained mentally active until the very end. On April 17, 1790, Benjamin Franklin passed away at the age of 84. His funeral was attended by over 20,000 people, and leaders from around the world mourned his passing. Benjamin Franklin's contributions shaped the United States in ways few others ever could. He helped win the Revolution by securing French support. He shaped America's identity through his writings and inventions. He pushed for the creation of the Constitution, ensuring the nation's survival. He fought against slavery, setting the stage for future abolitionists. His famous epitaph, written by himself, compared his life to a book. "The body of B. Franklin, printer, like the cover of an old book, its contents torn out, and stripped of its lettering and gilding, lies here, food for worms. But the work shall not be lost, for it will, as he believed, appear once more in a new and more perfect edition, corrected and amended by the author." Even in death, Franklin remained a man of wisdom and humor. He was, in every sense, the embodiment of the American dream, a self-made man who rose from humble beginnings to change the world forever. Even after his passing in 1790, Benjamin Franklin's influence continued to shape America and the world. His life was a testament to the power of hard work, intelligence, and civic duty. Unlike many historical figures who fade into obscurity, Franklin's ideas, inventions, and institutions remained woven into the fabric of society. His legacy extended far beyond his time, touching fields as diverse as science, politics, education, and diplomacy. He was not just one of the founding fathers, he was the embodiment of the American ideal, proving that self-improvement, ingenuity, and dedication to the public good could lead to greatness. Franklin's work during the Revolutionary War and the Constitutional Convention laid the foundation for American democracy. His Albany Plan of Union, 1754, was an early model for the United States Constitution. His contributions to the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution helped shape the principles of freedom, democracy, and government accountability. He strongly supported a government by the people for the people, advocating for civic engagement and the importance of an educated and informed public. Today, America's democratic system still reflects many of Franklin's ideas, from representative government to freedom of the press and the importance of compromise in politics. Franklin's scientific mind left a permanent mark on modern technology, and innovation. Many of his inventions are still in use or have influenced later advancements. The lightning rod still used on buildings and ships today, preventing countless fires and electrical damage. Bifocal glasses, a life-changing innovation for people with vision problems. The Franklin stove, the foundation for modern heating systems. Swim fins inspired the design of modern swimming flippers used by divers. Flexible urinary catheter, his invention paved the way for modern medical advancements. Franklin refused to patent any of his inventions, believing that knowledge should be freely shared for the benefit of humanity. This selfless attitude toward discovery set a precedent for scientific progress. Many of America's greatest institutions can trace their origins directly to Franklin's work. The Library Company of Philadelphia, 1731, America's first public library and the model for modern libraries. The American Philosophical Society, 1743, one of the first scientific organizations in America, fostering scientific research and innovation. The University of Pennsylvania, 1749, a groundbreaking institution, moving away from religious education and focusing on practical knowledge and the sciences. The Pennsylvania Hospital, 1751, the first public hospital in America, leading to modern healthcare systems. The first volunteer fire department, 1736, a model for fire departments worldwide. Franklin's belief in public service and education for all was ahead of its time. Today, millions of people benefit from institutions he helped create. Although Franklin had once owned slaves, he later became one of America's strongest voices against slavery. As president of the Pennsylvania Abolition Society, he fought for the gradual end of slavery. In 1790, just months before his death, he submitted a petition to Congress calling for the abolition of slavery. His public stance against slavery influenced future abolitionist movements in the United States. Though slavery would not be abolished until 1865, Franklin's efforts helped spark the national debate that would eventually lead to its downfall. Beyond politics and science, Franklin left a deep imprint on American culture and values. His famous Poor Richard's Almanac, 1732 to 1758, spread wisdom, humor, and practical advice that still resonates today. Many of Franklin's maxims have become timeless American proverbs. Early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. A penny saved is a penny earned. Diligence is the mother of good luck. Well done is better than well said. These sayings reflect Franklin's emphasis on hard work, frugality, and personal improvement, values that became deeply ingrained in American identity. Franklin's impact was so profound that he remains one of the most celebrated figures in American history. His face appears on the $100 bill, symbolizing his role as a statesman and intellectual. His name is honored in towns, schools, bridges, and streets across America. The city of Philadelphia is filled with statues and landmarks dedicated to him. Even today, Franklin is one of the most admired figures in history, celebrated not just in America but around the world. If Franklin were alive today, he would likely be fascinated by modern technology, education, and democracy. He would marvel at electricity powering the world, a direct result of the discoveries he pioneered. Libraries and universities flourishing, making knowledge more accessible than ever. Abolition of slavery, something he fought for in his final years. Space exploration, a scientific frontier he would have loved to explore. The Internet, a tool for spreading knowledge that aligns with his belief in public education. However, Franklin would likely also have concerns. The rise of political division, he always emphasized compromise and unity. Financial irresponsibility, his philosophy of saving and careful spending seems forgotten by many. The decline in civic involvement, he believed strongly in public service and engagement. But above all, Franklin would still see hope in the American people. He believed in the power of innovation, education, and self-improvement, and those ideals remain strong today. Benjamin Franklin's life was a remarkable journey, from a poor apprentice in Boston to a global icon of knowledge, freedom, and democracy. He was, heavy checkmark, a self-made man who proved that success comes through hard work and learning. Heavy checkmark, a scientist who changed the world with his discoveries in electricity and inventions. Heavy checkmark, a diplomat who helped win America's independence through diplomacy. Heavy checkmark, a philosopher whose wisdom still guides people today. Heavy checkmark, a patriot who helped build a nation that would last centuries. His story is not just history, it is a blueprint for personal and national success. More than 230 years after his death, Franklin's ideas, inventions, and institutions still shape our world. He was, and remains, one of the greatest minds in human history. Tonight, we're covering the life and legacy of the brilliant inventor Nikola Tesla. Tesla was a visionary scientist, engineer, and futurist whose groundbreaking work in electricity and wireless technology laid the foundation for much of the modern world. From the invention of alternating current to his dreams of wireless power, Tesla's genius continues to inspire and captivate people today. So, before we dive into this incredible journey, take a moment, if you haven't already, to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, let us know the time and location from which you are watching. Now, let's get right into our fascinating story, and we hope it helps you learn while you sleep. The night Nikola Tesla was born, a fierce thunderstorm raged over the village of Smiljan, in what is now modern-day Croatia. The date was July 10, 1856. As lightning illuminated the night sky and thunder echoed through the hills, a midwife assisting with the birth gasped. She looked at Tesla's mother, Georgina, and said in a trembling voice, "This child will be a child of darkness." But Georgina, a woman of great intelligence and intuition, shook her head. "No," she replied firmly. "He will be a child of light." It was an omen, though no one could have guessed how true those words would become. Nikola Tesla was born into a family with deep intellectual roots. His father, Milutin Tesla, was an Orthodox priest and a writer who encouraged young Nikola to read and think critically. His mother, although never formally educated, had an extraordinary ability to invent. She designed and built mechanical devices for household use, and she had a photographic memory. It was from her that Nikola inherited his fascination with creating and problem-solving. From a young age, Tesla was different. He saw the world not as others did but as a vast, interconnected system of energy and potential. His mind was constantly at work, and he often spoke of seeing flashes of light accompanied by visions, detailed images of machines and ideas that seemed to materialize out of nowhere. These were not simple daydreams. They were blueprints for inventions, vivid and precise. His childhood was filled with curiosity and experimentation. As a boy, he became fascinated with electricity when he rubbed a cat's fur and saw sparks. "What is this fire, father?" he asked. His father explained it as static electricity, but young Nikola was not satisfied. He wanted to know more. Despite his brilliance, Tesla's early years were marked by tragedy. His older brother, Dane, was the pride of the family, exceptionally gifted and admired by all. But one evening, when Nikola was 5 years old, Dane suffered a fatal accident while riding a horse. The event shook the Tesla family to its core. Worse, young Nikola was present when it happened, and the guilt and grief weighed on him for the rest of his life. His parents, especially his father, never fully recovered. Milutin Tesla had expected Dane to achieve greatness. Now, all that expectation shifted onto Nikola. It was a heavy burden for a young boy, but one that shaped his future. As Tesla grew, so did his hunger for knowledge. He devoured books, especially those on physics and engineering. He had a near-perfect memory and could recall entire pages from books he had read years earlier. His ability to visualize complex designs in his mind, without needing to write them down, would become one of his most famous talents. But even as his intellect flourished, so too did his rebellious streak. His father wanted him to follow in his footsteps and become a priest, but Nikola dreamed of machines, inventions, and electricity. He was destined for a different path, a path that would one day change the world. Nikola Tesla's thirst for knowledge grew stronger with each passing year. His mind was an engine that never stopped running, fueled by curiosity and an insatiable desire to understand the mysteries of the world. He excelled in school, often astounding his teachers with his ability to solve complex mathematical problems in his head. They accused him of cheating because he never needed to write down calculations. But Tesla wasn't cheating. His mind simply worked in ways others couldn't comprehend. As a teenager, he attended the Higher Real Gymnasium in Karlovac, where he was introduced to the wonders of physics and electrical engineering. It was here that he first encountered the concept of alternating current. Although he didn't fully grasp its potential at the time, something about it sparked his imagination. He knew electricity held the key to something revolutionary. Tesla was a relentless student. He would often study for 19 hours straight, skipping meals and losing himself in his books. His passion was so intense that it worried his father. Fearing that Nikola would work himself to death, his father tried to pull him away from his studies, urging him to rest. But Tesla refused. Then, a sudden illness changed everything. At the age of 17, Tesla contracted cholera. He was bedridden for months, slipping in and out of consciousness, his body racked with fever. Doctors had little hope for his survival. His father, desperate to save him, finally made a promise. "If you get better, I will let you study engineering." It was all Tesla needed to hear. He summoned every ounce of strength within him and began to recover. His body was weak, but his mind burned with determination. He had been given a second chance, and he would not waste it. True to his word, his father allowed him to enroll at the Austrian Polytechnic School in Graz in 1875. Tesla arrived with boundless enthusiasm, eager to immerse himself in his studies. He threw himself into mathematics, physics, and electrical engineering. His professors quickly recognized his extraordinary intellect. One professor, stunned by Tesla's ability to mentally reconstruct entire machines in perfect detail, called him a star student, and predicted great things for his future. But Tesla was not an ordinary student. His obsession with perfection and his unwillingness to accept anything less than total understanding often put him at odds with his teachers. He didn't just want to learn, he wanted to challenge everything he was taught. When he encountered a direct current (DC) motor in one of his classes, he immediately saw its flaws. He argued with his professor that direct current was inefficient, and that there had to be a better way. His professor dismissed him. "If there was a better way, young man, someone would have found it by now." Tesla was undeterred. He knew there was something wrong with the way electricity was being harnessed. He could feel it in his bones. And he was determined to find the answer, no matter what it took. But his obsession soon became his downfall. Tesla pushed himself harder and harder, sleeping only 2 hours a night, working until his health began to deteriorate once again. His professors, once impressed by his brilliance, began to worry about his erratic behavior. Eventually, Tesla dropped out of school before completing his degree. It was a devastating blow. He had lost his chance at formal education, but deep down, he knew he didn't need a diploma to change the world. He just needed an opportunity. And soon, fate would present him with one. After leaving the Austrian Polytechnic School, Nikola Tesla entered one of the darkest periods of his life. Without a degree, without a clear path forward, he drifted. He moved to Maribor, a small city in modern-day Slovenia, where he took a job as a draftsman. It was dull, uninspiring work, but it kept him afloat. More importantly, it gave him time to think. His mind was still consumed by the flaws of direct current, DC, and the vision of a better electrical system haunted him day and night. But Tesla was restless. He felt trapped in a world that didn't understand him. His family, still disappointed by his failure to complete his education, urged him to return to school, but he refused. His father's death in 1879 only deepened his sorrow. He was lost, a brilliant mind with nowhere to go. Then, an opportunity came from an unexpected place. A professor from his university days recognized his potential and helped Tesla secure a spot at Charles Ferdinand University in Prague. Tesla's mother, ever supportive of her son's genius, encouraged him to attend. But by the time he arrived, it was too late. He had missed enrollment. Once again, his formal education slipped through his fingers. Determined not to give up, Tesla moved to Budapest in 1881, where he found work at the Central Telephone Exchange. This was his first real step into the world of electrical engineering. The job was menial at first, but it exposed him to new ideas, new technologies, and most importantly, new people. One of those people was Tivadar Puskás, a Hungarian inventor and close associate of Thomas Edison. Puskás recognized Tesla's talent almost immediately. Tesla's ability to visualize complex electrical systems without drawing them on paper was unlike anything he had ever seen. In casual conversations, Tesla would describe intricate machines, perfect in every detail, as if they already existed. One evening, during a walk through the park, Tesla had a breakthrough. He had been wrestling with the idea of alternating current, AC, for years, but the solution had always eluded him. Then, as the sun set and the city lights flickered on, it all became clear. The concept of a rotating magnetic field, the key to making AC power practical, materialized in his mind. He grabbed a stick and began drawing diagrams in the dirt, explaining his idea to a friend. "This," he said, his eyes gleaming, "this is the future of electricity." Tesla knew he had discovered something groundbreaking. But in Budapest, there were no resources, no investors willing to fund his ideas. If he wanted to bring his vision to life, he needed to go where the world's greatest minds were shaping the future of electricity. He needed to go to America. With nothing but a few belongings and a letter of recommendation from Puskás, Tesla set his sights on New York City. The letter was addressed to none other than Thomas Edison, the most famous inventor in the world. If Tesla could impress Edison, he believed, his dream would finally become a reality. In the summer of 1884, Nikola Tesla arrived in New York City with nothing but a few cents in his pocket, a book of poetry, and a letter of introduction to Thomas Edison. The journey across the Atlantic had been difficult. He had nearly been robbed, his luggage had been lost, and at one point, he even had to work as a laborer to pay for food. But none of that mattered now. He had made it to America, the land of opportunity. Tesla stood on the bustling streets of Manhattan, gazing up at the towering buildings, the streetlights glowing dimly under the power of direct current, DC. This was the city Edison had electrified, but Tesla saw its weaknesses. The DC system was inefficient. Wires crisscrossed overhead in a tangled mess, barely able to carry electricity more than a mile. He knew there was a better way. The letter he carried was from Charles Batchelor, one of Edison's closest associates. It read, "Dear Mr. Edison, I know two great men and you are one of them. The other is this young man." With those words, Tesla gained entry into Edison's world. Tesla was finally standing before Thomas Edison, the most famous inventor in America. Edison was a man of great ambition, a tireless worker who had built an empire with his electrical inventions. He listened as Tesla spoke about his ideas, about his vision for alternating current, AC, and how it could revolutionize electricity. Edison was skeptical. He had spent years perfecting his direct current system and had no interest in AC. But Tesla's intelligence was undeniable, and Edison was always on the lookout for brilliant minds to work for him. "Fine," Edison said, rubbing his chin. "You work for me now." Tesla accepted, eager to prove himself. He threw himself into his work, helping to improve Edison's DC generators, fixing problems no one else could solve. His ability to mentally construct machines without needing blueprints astonished everyone at Edison's workshop. One day, Edison approached Tesla with a challenge. "There are inefficiencies in my dynamos. Fix them, and I'll pay you $50,000. $50,000. It was a fortune, enough for Tesla to build his own laboratory, to finally bring his AC dreams to life. Without hesitation, he set to work. For months, Tesla worked tirelessly, redesigning Edison's generators, making them more efficient, more powerful. When he finally presented his improvements, Edison was impressed. But when Tesla asked for his payment, Edison laughed. "Tesla, you don't understand our American humor." The $50,000 had been a joke. There would be no reward. Tesla was devastated. He had given everything to Edison's company, and now he had nothing to show for it. But Edison was not a man to apologize. Instead, he offered Tesla a small raise, from $18 a week to $25. It was an insult. Tesla had enough. He resigned on the spot, walking away from Edison and his empire. He was broke, alone, and jobless in a city that had no use for dreamers. For the first time, he questioned if he had made a mistake coming to America. But fate wasn't finished with him yet. Walking away from Thomas Edison's company was both an act of defiance and an act of desperation. Nikola Tesla was now jobless and penniless, wandering the streets of New York City with nothing but his ideas. He had left behind everything in pursuit of his dream, and now, that dream seemed further away than ever. For months, Tesla struggled to survive. He took on small jobs, even working as a manual laborer digging ditches to make ends meet. The man who once stood before Edison, discussing the future of electricity, was now covered in dirt, exhausted, barely scraping by. But even in his lowest moments, he never stopped thinking. He never stopped believing in alternating current AC. Then, in 1886, a glimmer of hope appeared. A group of investors took an interest in Tesla's ideas and agreed to fund a company in his name, the Tesla Electric Light and Manufacturing Company. It was his first real chance to bring his vision to life. With renewed energy, Tesla threw himself into work, designing new arc lighting systems and refining his ideas for AC power transmission. But the investors had other plans. They weren't interested in Tesla's long-term vision. They wanted quick profits, and when they saw that Tesla's work on AC would take time to develop, they abandoned him. They took the company, took his patents, and left him with nothing. Once again, Tesla was back on the streets, betrayed and broke. But Tesla was not a man who gave up easily. He had learned a harsh lesson. Money and power ruled the business world, and he needed allies who believed in more than just short-term gain. In 1887, Tesla finally met the right people. Two businessmen, Alfred S. Brown and Charles F. Peck, recognized Tesla's brilliance. Unlike his previous investors, they saw potential in his alternating current system and were willing to support him. With their help, Tesla was able to establish a new laboratory, a place where he could finally bring his ideas to life. In that laboratory, Tesla worked tirelessly, developing and perfecting the alternating current motor, a device that could efficiently transmit electricity over long distances. He designed transformers, generators, and power systems that would one day revolutionize the world. Then, in 1888, Tesla's breakthrough caught the attention of a man who would change his life forever, George Westinghouse. Westinghouse was a powerful businessman and inventor who had been searching for a better electrical system to compete with Edison's direct current. When he heard about Tesla's work, he knew he had found the answer. Westinghouse approached Tesla with an offer. He would buy Tesla's AC patents for $60,000, a fortune at the time. On top of that, he offered Tesla royalties for every horsepower of electricity produced using his patents. For the first time in his life, Tesla was not just surviving, he was thriving. He had money, resources, and most importantly, a powerful partner who believed in his vision. The war for the future of electricity had begun. And Tesla was ready to fight. By 1888, Nikola Tesla's alternating current, AC, system was no longer just an idea, it was a reality. Backed by George Westinghouse, Tesla's inventions had the potential to replace Thomas Edison's direct current, DC, system entirely. But Edison wasn't about to surrender his empire without a fight. The battle that followed became known as the War of Currents, a fierce and often brutal competition between Edison and Westinghouse, with Tesla at the center of it all. Edison had spent years building his DC network in New York, and he had powerful financial backers, including J.P. Morgan. But DC had a fundamental flaw: it couldn't efficiently travel long distances. Power stations had to be built every mile, making it expensive and impractical for large-scale use. Tesla's AC system, on the other hand, could be transmitted over great distances with minimal power loss, thanks to transformers that could step up or step down voltage as needed. Westinghouse knew that AC was the future, but Edison was determined to stop him. Edison launched a smear campaign against AC, spreading fear and misinformation. He claimed that alternating current was dangerous, even deadly. To prove his point, Edison staged public demonstrations where he electrocuted stray animals, dogs, cats, even an elephant, using AC power. He wanted to convince the public that AC was too dangerous for widespread use. His campaign reached its darkest point when Edison secretly funded the invention of the electric chair, using AC power. The first execution, meant to prove AC's lethal power, was a gruesome failure. The condemned man suffered horribly before finally dying. Edison hoped this would turn people against AC, but it only exposed the brutal lengths he was willing to go to in order to protect his business. Tesla, however, refused to engage in Edison's tactics. He remained focused on perfecting his system. Then came the opportunity that would prove AC's superiority once and for all. In 1893, a monumental project was announced, the harnessing of Niagara Falls to generate electricity. It was the biggest electrical contract in the world, and two teams were in competition, Edison's DC supporters and Tesla's AC team led by Westinghouse. The world watched as engineers debated which system would power the future. Many doubted AC, still fearful of Edison's warnings. But when Tesla demonstrated his AC system at the Chicago World's Fair, lighting up the entire event with thousands of electric bulbs, people saw the truth. AC was safe. AC was powerful. Westinghouse and Tesla won the contract. Niagara Falls would be powered by Tesla's alternating current, marking the beginning of the end for Edison's DC system. When the first transmission of AC electricity lit up Buffalo, New York, in 1896, the world changed forever. Tesla had not only won the war, he had electrified the modern age. But his greatest success would soon lead to his greatest loss. Despite giving up his fortune, Nikola Tesla remained as ambitious as ever. With the war of currents behind him and alternating current, AC, lighting up cities across the world, he turned his attention to his next great vision, wireless electricity. Tesla believed that power should be transmitted without wires, allowing anyone, anywhere, to access energy freely. To many, this idea sounded like science fiction, but in Tesla's mind, it was not only possible, it was inevitable. In the mid-1890s, Tesla developed one of his most famous inventions, the Tesla coil. It was a high-frequency transformer capable of producing powerful electrical discharges, sending bolts of lightning across the room. With this device, he demonstrated that electricity could be transmitted wirelessly. He lit lamps from across the room without any wires connecting them, a stunning feat that left audiences speechless. His experiments grew bolder. He began creating artificial lightning, sending electric arcs that stretched dozens of feet into the air. He believed that, with the right technology, he could build a global wireless power system, one that could send electricity through the atmosphere, eliminating the need for transmission lines. But to make this dream a reality, Tesla needed funding. While Tesla was working on wireless electricity, another inventor was making waves in the world of communication, Guglielmo Marconi. Marconi was developing radio transmission, sending signals over long distances using wireless telegraphy. Tesla had already been experimenting with wireless signals for years and had patented many of the key technologies. But Marconi, with financial backing from powerful investors, including Thomas Edison and J.P. Morgan, was gaining momentum. In 1901, Marconi successfully sent the first wireless telegraph signal across the Atlantic Ocean. The world hailed him as the father of radio. Tesla was furious. He knew that much of Marconi's work was based on his patents. But without the financial support or legal team to fight back, he watched as Marconi took credit for what he had long envisioned. Still, Tesla did not give up. He was convinced that wireless power was the real future, and he set out to prove it on a massive scale. Tesla's grandest project was Wardenclyffe Tower, a massive structure built on Long Island, New York. His plan was revolutionary, to create a global wireless energy system that could transmit electricity through the Earth's atmosphere, allowing people to receive power simply by placing an antenna on their roofs. It was Tesla's greatest gamble. With funding from J.P. Morgan, Tesla began construction in 1901. The tower rose 187 feet into the air, with a huge metal dome at the top. Tesla believed it could send electricity and radio signals across the world, creating a network that would connect all of humanity. But Tesla had made a critical mistake. When J.P. Morgan realized that Tesla's true goal was to provide free electricity, he cut off funding. Morgan, one of the most powerful businessmen in America, had no interest in free energy. If electricity could be given away, how would companies make money? Without Morgan's backing, Tesla ran out of funds. Wardenclyffe Tower was never completed. Tesla had come so close to changing the world, only to see his dreams collapse. By 1906, the project was abandoned. The tower stood as a monument to Tesla's genius, and to the forces that worked against him. His greatest invention had been silenced before it could even begin. And for Tesla, the years ahead would only grow darker. By the early 1900s, Nikola Tesla, once hailed as the man who had revolutionized electricity, was rapidly fading from public view. The collapse of Wardenclyffe Tower had devastated him, not just financially, but emotionally. He had devoted years of his life to building a global wireless energy system, only to have it taken away by powerful businessmen who feared losing control over the energy market. But Tesla refused to stop dreaming. He still believed that his most important work lay ahead of him. Yet, as time passed, the world was moving on without him. Tesla spent the next few years drifting between projects, struggling to find new investors. His refusal to patent many of his ideas made it difficult to secure funding, and his insistence on free energy made him a financial liability in the eyes of industrialists. At the same time, younger inventors, Marconi, Einstein, and others, were taking center stage in the scientific world. Tesla, once a giant in the field of electricity, was increasingly viewed as an eccentric relic of the past. His personal habits became more extreme. Tesla had always been known for his obsessions and phobias, but now they began to consume him. He became fixated on numbers, particularly the numbers 3, 6, and 9, believing they held the key to the universe. He would walk around a building 3 times before entering, and he demanded exactly 18 napkins be placed on his table when he dined. He also developed an unusual attachment to pigeons, feeding them in New York City parks and even bringing injured birds into his hotel room to care for them. One white pigeon, in particular, became his greatest love. "I loved that pigeon as a man loves a woman," he later confessed. "As long as I had her, there was a purpose to my life." But the world had little patience for Tesla's quirks. His reputation as a brilliant inventor had been replaced by whispers of madness. In 1915, rumors spread that Tesla and Thomas Edison would share the Nobel Prize in Physics. It seemed like a fitting conclusion to their decades-long rivalry, a moment of recognition for two of the most influential inventors in history. But when the award was officially announced, either man received it. There were conflicting reports as to why. Some said Tesla refused to share the prize with Edison, seeing him as a fraud who had stolen others' ideas. Others claimed Edison rejected the honor because he didn't want to be associated with Tesla. Regardless of the reason, Tesla never won a Nobel Prize. The recognition he so deeply deserved never came. In 1909, Guglielmo Marconi won the Nobel Prize in Physics for developing radio transmission. Tesla, who had filed key patents related to radio waves years before Marconi, was enraged. He knew that much of Marconi's work had relied on his discoveries, yet the world gave credit to the Italian inventor. For years, Tesla fought back. He filed lawsuits, trying to reclaim ownership of his radio patents. But with powerful financial backers, including Edison and J.P. Morgan, Marconi was untouchable. It wasn't until 1943, months after Tesla's death, that the U.S. Supreme Court finally ruled in Tesla's favor, recognizing that his patents had laid the foundation for modern radio. But by then, it was too late. Tesla had died alone, forgotten, and in poverty. And the world had moved on. By the early 1900s, Nikola Tesla, once hailed as the man who had revolutionized electricity, was rapidly fading from public view. The collapse of Wardenclyffe Tower had devastated him, not just financially, but emotionally. He had devoted years of his life to building a global wireless energy system, only to have it taken away by powerful businessmen who feared losing control over the energy market. But Tesla refused to stop dreaming. He still believed that his most important work lay ahead of him. Yet, as time passed, the world was moving on without him. A life of isolation. Tesla spent the next few years drifting between projects, struggling to find new investors. His refusal to patent many of his ideas made it difficult to secure funding, and his insistence on free energy made him a financial liability in the eyes of industrialists. At the same time, younger inventors, Marconi, Einstein, and others, were taking center stage in the scientific world. Tesla, once a giant in the field of electricity, was increasingly viewed as an eccentric relic of the past. His personal habits became more extreme. Tesla had always been known for his obsessions and phobias, but now they began to consume him. He became fixated on numbers, particularly the numbers 3, 6, and 9, believing they held the key to the universe. He would walk around a building 3 times before entering, and he demanded exactly 18 napkins be placed on his table when he dined. He also developed an unusual attachment to pigeons, feeding them in New York City parks and even bringing injured birds into his hotel room to care for them. One white pigeon, in particular, became his greatest love. "I loved that pigeon as a man loves a woman," he later confessed. "As long as I had her, there was a purpose to my life." But the world had little patience for Tesla's quirks. His reputation as a brilliant inventor had been replaced by whispers of madness. The Nobel Prize scandal. In 1915, rumors spread that Tesla and Thomas Edison would share the Nobel Prize in physics. It seemed like a fitting conclusion to their decades-long rivalry, a moment of recognition for two of the most influential inventors in history. But when the award was officially announced, either man received it. There were conflicting reports as to why. Some said Tesla refused to share the prize with Edison, seeing him as a fraud who had stolen others' ideas. Others claimed Edison rejected the honor because he didn't want to be associated with Tesla. Regardless of the reason, Tesla never won a Nobel Prize. The recognition he so deeply deserved never came. Marconi steals the credit for radio. In 1909, Guglielmo Marconi won the Nobel Prize in Physics for developing radio transmission. Tesla, who had filed key patents related to radio waves years before Marconi, was enraged. He knew that much of Marconi's work had relied on his discoveries, yet the world gave credit to the Italian inventor. For years, Tesla fought back. He filed lawsuits, trying to reclaim ownership of his radio patents. But with powerful financial backers, including Edison and J.P. Morgan, Marconi was untouchable. It wasn't until 1943, months after Tesla's death, that the U.S. Supreme Court finally ruled in Tesla's favor, recognizing that his patents had laid the foundation for modern radio. But by then, it was too late. Tesla had died alone, forgotten, and in poverty. And the world had moved on. By the 1920s, Nikola Tesla was no longer a celebrated inventor but a recluse, living in cheap New York hotel rooms, surviving on little more than the kindness of a few admirers. His once brilliant career had unraveled, leaving him isolated and without financial stability. Despite his hardships, Tesla never stopped inventing, dreaming, and theorizing. Even as the world forgot him, his mind remained filled with ideas, some practical, others far ahead of their time. One of Tesla's last great claims was his development of a so-called death ray, a weapon capable of destroying entire armies at a distance. He called it the Teleforce, an energy-based weapon that he believed could make war obsolete. Tesla claimed his device could send concentrated beams of energy across miles, capable of knocking aircraft from the sky or melting enemy weapons instantly. He reached out to various governments, including the United States, the Soviet Union, and Britain, offering his invention as a tool for peace through deterrence. But no one took him seriously. To many, Tesla was now seen as a mad scientist, his wild claims dismissed as the ramblings of an old man who had lost his grip on reality. Yet, decades later, scientists would continue to explore similar energy-based weaponry, suggesting that Tesla might have been on to something all along. In the 1930s, as tensions between world powers grew, Tesla made headlines again. He announced that he had discovered a new energy source that could provide unlimited power, completely reshaping global industry. Governments took notice. The FBI and U.S. military intelligence began keeping tabs on Tesla, worried that his discoveries could fall into the wrong hands. Some even speculated that his research could be turned into a powerful weapon, perhaps even the basis for modern directed energy weapons. In 1943, at the age of 86, Tesla was found dead in his New York hotel room, alone and penniless. The official cause of death was heart failure, but rumors persisted. Some believed the government had seized his research. Others whispered of foreign spies desperate to obtain his secrets. Immediately after his death, the FBI confiscated all of Tesla's papers, notes, and blueprints, labeling them top secret. To this day, much of Tesla's later work remains classified, fueling speculation about what he might have discovered in his final years. Tesla's funeral was a small affair, attended only by a handful of friends and admirers. There were no grand tributes, no national recognition for the man who had revolutionized the world. But Tesla's story was far from over. In the decades that followed, the world would finally begin to recognize the true genius of Nikola Tesla. The man who had died forgotten was about to be remembered forever. Though Nikola Tesla died in obscurity in 1943, his legacy did not remain buried for long. The world that had once dismissed him as a mad scientist slowly began to recognize the profound impact of his work. His inventions had reshaped modern civilization, even if he did not live to see the full extent of his influence. Shortly after his death, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Tesla's favor, recognizing that his patents had laid the foundation for radio communication, a victory that came too late to change his fate, but not too late to cement his role in history. His alternating current (AC) system became the global standard for electricity, powering cities, homes, and industries worldwide. His innovations in wireless technology, robotics, and X-rays paved the way for future generations of inventors and scientists. Tesla had not just been an inventor, he had been a visionary, imagining technologies that would only become reality decades or even a century later. In the mid-20th century, as new generations of scientists rediscovered Tesla's work, he rose from obscurity to become one of the most admired figures in technological history. His name was given to the Tesla unit, a measure of magnetic field strength. Books and documentaries were produced about his extraordinary life. And in 2003, a company bearing his name, Tesla Incorporated, founded by engineers Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning, later led by Elon Musk, brought his legacy into the modern era. The company's success in electric vehicles, battery storage, and renewable energy reintroduced Tesla's name to the mainstream, making him a symbol of innovation, disruption, and futuristic thinking. Today, Tesla is no longer the forgotten genius, he is a cultural icon. His visions of wireless power, renewable energy, and free-flowing electricity remain subjects of study and debate. Scientists are still exploring many of his unfinished ideas, from wireless energy transmission to directed energy weapons. Even his dream of harnessing unlimited power from the Earth's natural forces is more relevant than ever in the age of climate change and sustainable energy. Tesla was a man ahead of his time, a mind so vast that the world struggled to keep up. He lived and died believing that science should serve humanity, not profit, and though he never achieved his dream of free energy, he gave humanity the tools to one day make it possible. Nikola Tesla's life was one of genius and tragedy, triumph and loss. He had seen the future, our future, long before we did. And in the glow of every electric light, in the hum of every power station, and in the wireless signals that connect our world, his presence remains. The world finally caught up to Nikola Tesla. And in the end, it was he who won.